Hello, everyone, and welcome to Occult Explorers. I'm Darren, Snappy, and I'm joined by my co-host here, Dion. Say hi, Dion.
Hey, hey.
And so for today's episode, we're going to be discussing some Arabian legends and mythology, and we're going to be looking at mainly sacred donkeys and the figure of Mary Al-Copt.
Yes, yes. And once again, trigger warnings. We might talk
Right.
about body fluids and whatever, this and that, and who knows what they did in ancient times. And also, today, Sunday, it's Easter Sunday.
Yeah, happy Easter to everyone who celebrates, and time of rebirth, right? I always like to remind myself that story and that mythology is much, much deeper and much more ancient. And like we were talking before, and that's where we're going to start today, right, Dion? We want to go right back to that central Easter rite.
Oh, yeah, the garden and the resurrection. Might as well go to the first picture.
Yeah, let's do it up here. So we're going to begin here. Right.
There you go. The tomb, the resurrection. And so in the previous episodes, we were talking about Mary's, different Mary Magdalene, Mary Salome, the Virgin Mary, the mother. And so this is what we're talking about today is the resurrection and Easter. They go to the tomb, and you can see there's a jar on the right bottom, and you notice the color of the robes, blue, purple, which we know those are dyes, mollusk dyes, are indigo, woad, it could be for the blue. And they're going with embalming spices to go embalm Emmanuel. And they get there, and he's not there. But there's a young boy, which people will say was the young boy from the garden. And he's now wearing white robes, and the sindons are laying there because the medicated wraps, because the mummy has been brought back to life, resurrected.
Crazy. So that's so right at the corner here, that's our boy, right? The naked boy from the garden. And then over here, we probably have our Mary Salome or Magdalene, one of these figures.
And some people will say that's an angel, that the boy was an angel all along. And we also discussed in the last episode, he could have been a resurrected mummy boy. There could be many versions of it, but this is the day they come and he's gone.
Yeah, that's a very common trope within, like, I know Catholics usually say he's an angel, as well as some Orthodox say that he was an angel, a representative. It becomes a more philosophical approach, right? But either way, this is what we got here, so let's keep going.
Oh, Ishtar. So we're talking about the concept of Easter. Some people.
Who's Ishtar? So we've been talking a lot about these mother goddesses. We were talking about Astarte and Inanna. Who's Ishtar and what's her relation? Like in Ashra as well?
She's another version of them. And so there's different aspects. Some of these goddesses, they take on fire, sky, water, earth, rebirth. Some of them are destructive. Some of them get tied in with animals like cats or lions or doves. And so Ishtar has doves. Part of and the doves are a big part we were talking about of the different mythology down there. Like at Ashkelon, we were talking about in some of the episodes, doves used to freely go around the whole city. And they worshiped the doves. They used to sacrifice them. They would eat them. There's even rituals at the Mandeans, which are based on John the Baptist, which we'll get into later in different episodes, because it's around these regions right here, where they sacrifice doves. It's part of the ritual symbology is the sacrificing of the dove.
We also know, like in the Greek pagan tradition, right? The doves were used as augurs, right? Like for divination practices, and were seen as an omen usually related to peace and prosperity.
Oh, yeah. And since we're talking about Ashkelon and the doves of Ashkelon, we also remember we talked about the dogs of Ashkelon. There was that dog cemetery down there.
Right.
And this figures into the mythology. If you go to the next picture, we mentioned the dog cemetery of Ashkelon, that there was 1,400 buried dogs, ritually buried. But we didn't talk about the usage of it. We talked about the myth that how Heracles, his dog finds the mollusk shell and bites it, and his mouth turns purple. And that's one of the mythologies down there. We also know it's the dogs are related to all the goddesses down there.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
in certain mythologies, the dogs, and also in history, the dogs were used for medicine. So if you notice right here, the dogs are licking. Dogs like to lick, and they have antiseptic properties in their tongue. And so, what in ancient times, if you were sick or had wounds or different things, you could go to these healers, and the dogs would lick your wounds, and you would pay them. And it was like going to a doctor. You're using the dog's medicine in his tongue.
Right. Yeah, no, the dogs are always associated. Like it also makes, like you said, with associated with the goddess as well. Like you will see Artemis with her hunting dog. You'll also see Hecate with her 3 dogs. So very powerful symbol, and yeah, with healing as well in there.
And remember, those were the patron goddesses down there, is Urania, Aphrodite, and they had Dionysus down there at Ashkelon, and a lot of dogs. And another goddess that deals with dogs in the area, I don't know if we mentioned it in the previous episode, is Lamashtu. If you want to go to the next picture.
Touched on it slightly. Who's Lamashtu again?
So Lamashtu is a demon. She's a demon goddess in the region. And, if you could see her right there, she's riding on a donkey. That's what she's famous for, is riding on a donkey. And what she does is she goes around stealing babies or stealing semen. She's the semen demon.
So she's the one that's related to the Lilitu, right? And the later Lilith mythology.
Right, exactly. And so she, you can see there's snakes. She's connected. She's holding snakes. She has a dog. It's these elements are ancient. They hang out by olive groves, and the way you would get rid of Lamashtu, and there's also Lamia. That's another term. You've heard of that one.
Yeah,
that goddess.
Snake people, right? The snake goddess.
Yeah. And so the way you got rid of her in ancient times was you would build a boat. And you can see there's a little boat at the bottom. And you would build a boat and put a little effigy of her, a little statue. And you would put trinkets on the boat, like perfumes, candies, things to attract her attention. And you would take that boat and you would send it down the river. And it would attract her away from going to get your kids or getting the semen. Because she was going looking for semen. And when she stopped looking for semen in little boys was after the 8th day. Because we know traditionally the 8th day is Passover.
Oh, wow.
I mean, circumcision. I'm sorry. I said that wrong, because it's circumcision and Passover are tied together. What we talked about last time. But on the 8th day is when a young boy is supposed to be circumcised.
Right.
And after that, she doesn't care no more.
Interesting. And you know what? All of that you were just saying really reminds me of some of the Asherah mythology we were discussing last time, right? Where you were telling us about how Asher was seen walking on the water of Lake Galilee, and how the worshippers would build boats and put her effigy as a pole on the boat with the oils and push it out into the middle of the lake. And then that's where the goddesses, or where the mirror bearers go right after they've discovered Jesus, right?
Well, yeah, after he's crucified, they go and they're out there fishing. A day later, they're out there fishing on a boat. They're not fishing on the boat.
No.
And back to circumcision. We were talking about the foreskin. In the first episode, we talked about how they bury the foreskin by the olive tree for Saint Augustine in North Africa, and how in the Syriac infancy gospel they don't bury the foreskin; they put it into myrrh oil. Well, so in traditional priesthood of Judaism, you bury the foreskin. That's what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to keep it around. You're supposed to bury it. It's traditional to bury it. So that's a little hint as to what type of magic they were doing. If they were doing Orthodox, or let's say traditional, or if they were doing some of the other older goddess, let's say rituals, like keeping the foreskin and not burying the foreskin, because you're supposed to bury it. And that's one of the reasons it deals with Lamashtu as well, is because she's attracted to that. And you want to have long, good life for the kid. You got to get rid of the scent of the foreskin. and you do it by an olive tree, and it protects it.
Right, and there's also this whole thing with the ritual of removing the foreskin. We see the earliest elements of this in African traditions, and there's a couple of these African traditions in East and in West Africa where they're performing these circumcisions as a rite to Saturn and as a stand-in for castration. You know, it is a symbolic, ritualized castration that these people are doing to unite themselves into the Saturnian cult, you know, which is always, Saturn is paired always with Aphrodite. You know, they're synonymous. Aphrodite is the goddess with the penis, and Saturn is the god without a penis, you know?
Right. You know, speaking of donkeys, you know, so we're talking about how she's riding a donkey, you know, and the goddesses and the donkey are the prophets and gods, how they're connected to donkeys. Let's go to the next picture.
Right.
Samson and Delilah. I don't know if did you see that? Is that before your time?
I don't think I've seen this one, but I always love the Samson story just because it's so insane. Killing all these people with the jawbones of a donkey. Like, wow. You know, going in genocide on the Philistines.
In this poster, it's not just the jawbone, it has his head on it too.
Right.
You know, he has his extra strength version. But
and I wonder if the jawbone is related to Hercules' club, you know, because they're such similar figures. And it seems to me like Samson is a clear, you know, euhemerization of Heracles.
You know, in other versions, somebody else uses a jawbone to kill their brother, and that would be Cain.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that one.
Yeah, because like I said, he catches Abel sacrificing babies, you know, so infanticide. So that's why Cain got mad, the vegetarian.
That's amazing.
Just saying. There's other interpretations.
Yeah, no, there is that whole Canaanite Cain tradition, right, which is very different. That
so the mark of Cain is a badge for killing his pedophile brother. Right. Not pedophile. Right. I'm sorry, infanticide, for killing the child.
Yeah, for killing the child murderer, you know, and resisting the tyranny of God. Right. It's a very Luciferian version of that story, and it's wild how much that motif has survived across history. But,
and you ask, where did they get kids? Where would he have got a kid to do the baby sacrifice? And it would have been potentially his own kid from his, you know, because you ask where they get women from to make these babies, and to like Cain, where did Cain get his wife? And they had twins. They were twins, you know, they had a twin sister, each one of them.
I know that in like Byron's play, it's all incestuous. I don't know enough about that story, but I would assume the way the Bible is, right? Like,
yeah, this isn't your traditional Bible. You got other versions that talk about,
of course,
you know, where does Cain get a wife from? And supposedly that's his twin sister. In some of the other versions, you know. So yeah, let's go to the next picture, since we're talking about donkeys here.
Right.
And talking about donkeys in the Bible. This is another story of Balaam. I don't know if you're familiar with Balaam. He had a donkey, and he was mean to the donkey. He used to whip it and beat it, and that gave him magic powers.
Doesn't the donkey talk to him? Doesn't the
donkey talks? Yeah. God gives it back, and the donkey tells him, like, why are you hitting me? What are you doing? Don't I give you everything you want? And in some of the other interpretations, he says, don't I give you everything you want at night?
Oh my God.
This is what we're talking about. I'm telling you about the real versions, not the real version. Sorry, once again, I keep speaking too fast, folks. Alternative version. So supposedly the powers of prophecy came from him molesting the donkey at night, beating it, some BDSM stuff. And then finally the angel shows up and says, what are you doing? You can't do this to the donkey. The donkey being representative of Set.
Right. And what is Set again? Like, what is Set? I know related to the desert and whatnot, but that's the Egyptian.
That's the Egyptian donkey god, which we'll talk about later. So let's go to the next picture.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that somebody has to ride on a donkey to be proclaimed a pharaoh, a king, the prophet, and this is Jesus. And he tells the beloved John to go steal the donkey. Right before this, he tells him, hey, go get a donkey, and just go find one. Take it. And then he rides into town on the donkey.
Yeah, it's powerful imagery, and I know, like in a lot of Bronze Age cultures, right, the donkey predates the horse, and the donkey was always seen as the sign of nobility. So this is a common motif.
And if you go back real quick, notice the colors, the red. You see the donkey in red, and the red and white, which we'll talk about later. And so you can go to the next picture.
Always red and white and blue and purple.
And on this one, here we have the Virgin Mary. Well, she's not a virgin in that picture anymore. And she's riding a donkey. And if you look at the symbologies of the paintings and in the text, the donkey's there the whole time. From the moment she gets pregnant, they're riding around with the donkey until even the birth. The donkey's at the birth. It's
right.
there, it's there watching.
He's a guardian figure.
He's a witness. It's a type of a witness, and he's a watcher or a witness. And we'll reveal that later in the episode. Just the connection between these donkeys and the prophets, and like even Mary, right there. So that's Mary on a donkey, and there's also another Mary that rides on a donkey, and that was the title of the episode was Maria Al-Copt,
Mm-hmm.
Maria Al-Copt. So Mary the Copt is from Egypt. Let's go to the next picture. Here's one painting of her, and she's wearing an Egyptian-style hat, fez, with the coins, and she's lighter than what she originally would have been. Obviously, she would have been dark-skinned because that's part of the mythology. And she
her story is that, right, she, as far as I understand, Muhammad sends out a bunch of letters to all these different bishops and kingdoms, and at this time Egypt is under Byzantine rule. He's ruled by a bishop prince kind of character from Colchis, originally named Al-Muqayyis, and sends him a letter, and Muqayyis is like, I'm not converting to Islam, but here's a bunch of gold, here's some oils, and here's this beautiful woman, that you can have.
Right. And Muqayyis, the way you pronounce it, some of the way they pronounce it is more like Malcart.
Okay.
It's almost like Malcart, this dude from Alexandria. And so
interesting.
And he says, well, I don't believe the prophet is supposed to come from your region. He thought the prophet was going to come from Syria, from up there. That's what he says. That's where the prophets normally come from. And he goes, but I recognize you have some juice. I'm going to send you out a couple slave girls and a donkey. Now, supposedly, her father is Shamun, or Simon, who's the son of Jacob.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what they consider in Islamic tradition, that she's from that lineage. And if you know the story of Jacob, the twin, and his brother is that Esau. And remember, Esau is hairy, and it goes into the fields, while his brother Jacob has no hair, is more effeminate, and stays in the tents. And the mom wants him to be the leader, but the older brother normally should be the leader. And so he tricks him out of his birthright, Jacob. When his brother comes in from the fields, he's hungry, and he goes, hey, what are you cooking? And he has this red stew he's cooking. It's a red soup. And he even says, I want some of that red soup. And remember, our red colors are psychoactives.
Of course.
Because you wonder why. You'll learn this as a kid in Sunday school, is that the twin brother tricks his brother out of his birthright to be the ruler of all of Israel for a cup of red soup. That must be a pretty powerful red soup, to give up your birthright for all that. And then he goes back into the fields, and that's when Jacob goes and the mom prepares a dish for their father, who's blind, and he goes and she tells him, "Go take this to your father and get the blessing, so you can be the new ruler." And he says, "Well, my skin isn't hairy; it's soft." Remember, this is the twin that's soft, and we always talk about the two different types of twins. And the mom says, "Well, hey, let's take the skins from the goat and put it on your neck and on your arms and go in there." And then he goes in there, and the blind father rubs him, and he goes, "Oh, my son, here is the blessing." And then he eats the food, and then as soon as Esau comes back in from the field, he's like, what happened?" And even the father's like, "Oh, what happened?" He says, "Well, I can't give you the blessing. He already took it from me," meaning he drank, and he even says he drained it from him. He can't give it to him because he was like, it was a magic power.
That's wild. And just to what you were saying, that totally makes me think of satyrs, the hairiness becoming goat-like. And that's what they used to say would happen with, in the early Greek tradition, before the Romans. It's not that these were half men, half goats. They were men who took on the properties of goats. They became super horny. They got massive erections. They went wild in the woods. This is a result of psychoactive drugs.
Yeah, well, it's even funny. In a couple chapters later, his wife, I think if that's Rachel or Leah, if I'm not wrong, they can't make babies, so they have him get with the slave girls, and then finally they want kids of their own, and one of the wives comes to her and she says, "Hey, I'll let you sleep with Jacob." She tells her sister, "I'll let you sleep with with my husband, if we're mandrake." She wants mandrake root.
Which is in the psychoactive.
Yeah, so she has to go get him the mandrake. So you could have a night with my husband for mandrake root. Wow. Because it's the herbs and procreation that go together in these stories. So that I was just talking about that just to preface the grandfather, and down to Shamoun or Simon, who has Maria Al-Copt. And so she's a slave girl, or another version, she's an Egyptian priestess, versed in all the different ways. That's why she's sent there. And the coins, you see coins on the females in belly dancing, and back in the ancient times, those are dowry coins, are wealth, images of wealth. That was sometimes you didn't go with the prettiest belly dancer, you went with the belly dancer that had the best coins.
Right.
And it's a certain there's all these connotations to that. So they go to Muhammad and they show up, and he likes them. Muhammad's like, "Wow, you're pretty." And Muhammad likes the donkey. Because guess what? This donkey, Yafur, that's his name, Yafur. Well, his name isn't Yafur. Muhammad asked him his name. If you want to go to the next picture, this is Seth, an Egyptian god, the donkey god. We're going to use him as a placeholder, since this donkey that we're talking about comes from Egypt with an Egyptian priestess named Mary. So the donkey, Yafur, that's what Muhammad gives him the name of. And the reason is, he asks him, "Well, what's your name, donkey?" And the donkey can talk. And the donkey tells him, "I'm the son of the witnesses. I'm the son of the witness. My father is Ibn Witness." That means son of. And he tells him, "We're a line of donkeys that go back to ancient times, and only prophets have ridden us. And we're witnesses of all the ancient events. And my great-grandfather was the donkey that Jesus rode on into Jerusalem." Wow. And that's what he tells Muhammad. Muhammad goes, "Well, I'm going to give you a new name. Your new name is Deer." So after that, he was called the Deer. That's Yafur. That means deer. And then the next question that he asks him, he says, "Hey, Yafur, do you want some girls?" And the donkey says, "No." The donkey didn't like girls. He didn't want girls. And after that, they had an intense bond. There's different legends and myths in these, you could read in these Muslim commentaries, about he would ride the donkey to go when he had meetings with different tribal chiefs or different people, and he would ride up to the house and get off, and the donkey would go up to the door of the house and knock on the door with its head. And then when the door would open, the donkey would move its head towards Muhammad and wave over there, go over there and talk to the boss. He was he was
That's
like his
crazy.
secretary,
Yeah.
and he would even ride the donkey during the Hajj. You know what the Hajj is? They go around the Kaaba
Yeah, where they
stone.
go around
He
the
would
Kaaba
ride
Stone.
the donkey around the Kaaba stone.
This
They had a
also
special
reminds me,
relationship with this donkey. And it's sad that the donkey, him and the donkey, it only came to an end when he died, when Muhammad died, which we'll talk about later, his death, how he was poisoned. The donkey was so sad. He threw himself down a well.
I heard
And
about this. Commit
and
suicide.
unfortunately, even though Muhammad was a prophet, the Yafur had to go to hell because he committed suicide, and that's a sin in Islam. So there's nothing Muhammad could do about his beloved donkey, you know. And there's a lot more relationships with him and the donkeys. If you want to go to the next picture.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say, like, though,
Yeah.
the donkeys associated, like, this is an ancient symbol for kings, right? Dionysus rides a donkey. A lot of different gods ride donkeys.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Here we
like
got our Hajj.
here's the Kaaba stone. It is in modern times that he used to ride the donkey around, and you can see they have the pillars, the two towers, the Waqim and Boaz they do rituals between the different towers. In a lot of mythologies are the two pillars of Hercules. These two tower mythologies figure heavy in all this mythologies with donkeys and olive trees, two towers, fish. There's certain things, certain elements.
The two towers there are also really one of the most dangerous rites of the Hajj because you're supposed to stone one of the pillars that's representative of Satan. And oftentimes this gets out of hand and people die or get trampled.
Yeah. So the stoning of Satan, I don't know if that's al-Jamarat. What happens is they have these obelisks set up, different obelisks that it's not the pillars right there that they're stoning. It's a different section, and and you get these rocks, and you're supposed to throw these rocks into this pit, but they have these pillars which are obelisks. And like you said, people will freak out and have stampedes. They've had thousands of people die, or get injured. Hundreds of people die, thousands will get injured, and they stampede. And the way what the Hajj is, you circle it 7 times, like Joshua circled it 7 times, and they blew the horns. A lot of the 7 veils, the 7 mythology is heavy in everything. So you circle 7 times, and if you go to the next picture.
And to me, it all relates to Saturn. Black cube, circling 7 times,
And then you go up to it, and in the corner of that cube is a vagina, a silver vagina, and embedded in it is a black meteorite. We were talking about the meteorites as the capstone of the pyramid, meteorites as Shiva Lingam, meteorites as the Black Madonna, meteorites as places of fertility or destruction where they land. But in this version, they all got to kiss it. So 3 to 5 times a day around the world, our Muslim brothers kneel down and pray towards that meteorite in the vagina in the corner.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's a lingam, right? It's encased in a pedestal, which is representative of the vagina, and then the meteorite is the phallus that's sitting inside the vagina, which you kiss. And that's that particular meteorite is tektite, which is associated again with Saturn, and is one of the most holy things that you'll find around the globe. Like I know within the Indian and Buddhist traditions, it's called the Chinnamasi stone. It's associated with the snake people, the Nagas, and is also said to grant wishes, and eternal life. The Buddha is said to carry one.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like I said, and originally they were circling. It wasn't that big Kaaba like that. It was a little different, and they would circle it and sacrifice to it. It was more of a pagan. And Muhammad even says he includes it because it was something that the older tribes used to do, and go to the next picture.
Yeah. Because in the original time, we have to remember that Mecca originally was a place of religious pilgrimage, and the Kaaba predates Islam as a house of worship. And originally what would happen is you'd have all of these different tribes would come and they would bring their patron deities, and they'd place place him within the Kaaba. And then they would have poetry contests where they would basically fight each other in these poetic battles, talking about how great the various deities were. And the deity that won would have their poetry draped over the Kaaba, like we saw with those black cloaks, you know?
And you know, the direction of the Kaaba, or where the Kaaba is at, are the focus of prayer. You know, when the brothers do the prayer on the rugs, on the magic carpets, it wasn't originally Mecca. Before that, it was people talk about it being at the dome of the rock in Jerusalem.
Yeah, they pointed towards Jerusalem, it says in the Quran originally.
But even before that, the original mosques themselves, the mosques, the oldest mosques on the planet, were faced towards Petra in Jordan.
That's also true. I remember this.
You know, and so this picture is a coin right there, and that coin has a spear in the middle of two arches, or an arch. That's the spear of Anaza, which was Muhammad's magic spear. And in the older times, so when they were doing prayer before there was mosque, he would put the spear in the ground, and he would say, "Pray towards that spear. That's the direction of the Kaaba." But other people have posited that that's Asherah pole, straight up Asherah pole, sundial, threshing floor. You know, we know what poles are.
Right.
You know,
and
totem pole.
Right. It looks like an Asherah pole. It reminds us of the threshing pole at Eleusis, where they would be spinning around it. Right. Like this is a very common ritual trope within the Mediterranean. You know, these goddess poles, and always related to the goddess.
And so later on, this spear gets replaced by a section in the mosque, and then everyone prays towards that direction because it's oriented towards the Kaaba stone and not Petra.
Yeah, the Qibla, I think that's what they call it. Yeah, but yeah, there's a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a point within every mosque that is supposed to be perfectly orientated in the direction of Mecca.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go to the next picture. And so here you could see here's a map, so you can get the general idea of where it says Saudi Arabia, the bottom right there. That's where you have Mecca down there, and you go up to the middle up there left, and that's where you get like Israel and Jerusalem, and to the left over is Egypt. The top is Turkey, and then cold cheese. You know, and when Muhammad got with Maria, he sent an order that back in Egypt to protect her village. And part of that, he said, because he was the son-in-law of Egypt. It was a title he considered, just like how Jesus to be called out of Egypt, you know. And so when I was talking about the donkeys, he's taken to Jerusalem on a magic donkey called Barak in the middle of the night. You know, there's more to these donkeys. Like Muhammad's relationship with that was Yafur, but this is a different donkey called Barak. And he ascends to heaven and has visions, and that's where they teach him how to pray, and he meets the other prophets and everything. And there's even
7 levels or whatever, or 9.
Yeah. And that's Barak right there. Those are older manuscript visions or images, and different authors say it relates to Amanita muscaria. You know, and that part of the tradition was like the actual real tradition was to feed the mushroom to the donkey and drink the donkey piss, now being bioactive, broken down through the donkey's superior digestive tract than the human, you know, because we know that we talk about medicated urines.
Right. We know that reindeer do this, right? This is common. And like we have traditions in Siberia that still practices.
What did Muhammad name his donkey? Deer.
Right.
I don't know why, but yeah. So, and then there, you know, and people say, well, did they drink piss in Islam? Sure. You could easily type on Google Muhammad and drinking Muhammad's piss, and there's lots of commentaries about talking about drinking his piss. Different people would drink it as a sweet nectar. In one, there's a slave girl, Salome, who drinks his piss, and he says, now you'll be immune forever because you've drinking the sweet magic piss. You know, And even there's Salome's in this story too, as well. And and even go to the next image.
Wow. That's crazy with the pee stuff, because we know that DMT is stronger in the urine than it's when it's ingested. Like when you take Anita muscaria on your own, you not only do you suffer the poison, but the initial DMT trip isn't as strong as if you were to then drink your urine afterward.
Right. And and not only is Muhammad goes to heaven and is taken to Jerusalem on a donkey and has a magic donkey that he rides on and does the Hajj. Then when he dies, he goes to heaven on a donkey. The Jalal, or the Antichrist that comes back, he comes back on a donkey.
Wow.
So like donkeys and I didn't talk about David was a donkey in the Bible, rode on a donkey. There's a lot of symbolism, more than what we're just, going into. And also like the earliest graffiti they found with that donkey head.
Yeah, Jesus with the donkey head, right?
Yeah. Are the people that go in the Holy of Holies?
The Roman historians argue that after they sacked the Holy of Holies, well, there's two different versions. One that says that there was a statue of a man with a donkey head. Another one that says there's a statue of an old man riding a donkey.
Yeah. Yeah. So the donkeys, it just figures in it. And so let's go to the next image. And so we're at Maria the Copt. I just wanted to give you a little of the other story around her, the stuff. And so in that donkey that she brought. And so Muhammad likes her. And so does his advisors. They're taken up with her. They like her. And his other wives don't like her. And his lead wife is Aisha. Now, before Aisha, see, Muhammad's original wife was Fatima.
Well, he has Khadijah, you mean? Khadijah was his original wife.
No, it's Fatima.
Isn't Fatima his daughter? Because his Khadijah is the older lady who teaches him how to
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we're talking about the older lady.
Yeah, Khadijah.
The widower, and gets her money and divorces her. And that money is what's used to finance the army, because he built an army. That was the thing. He was financing the army. And then later on, he got with Aisha, who was very young at the time, and he had to even wait, because there's a, I don't know if it's a hadith, the surah talks about when he would show up, all the little kids would run and hide from him, and he picked her. He saw her and she was special. She was like 9 years old and she played with little dolls. It even says he let her play with dolls, which is forbidden in Islam, but just because he liked her so much.
Yeah, and they say he doesn't force her to wear the so married women have to wear the veil, and he didn't force her to wear the veil because she was still a child.
Yeah, and he even has to wait for her menses to start and to start messing around with her, and then gets kids with her. So when Maria shows up at this point, Mary the Copt, she wasn't into it. They all conspired. There's even different chapters they talk about. They got together and told him, you cannot be with this woman. Because they were young girls to her. This is an older Egyptian priestess, dark-skinned priestess, mature in her ways. Everyone was taken back by her. And even Muhammad got caught having sex with her in one of his other wives' house.
Yeah.
That's different days. He had different days for different wives.
There's this whole debate, right, where did Muhammad lie to his wife, all this stuff. But the story goes, right, like he gets caught sleeping with her in one of his wives' houses, the wives freak out and demand that he abandon her, and he agrees to abandon her, to no longer have her as a concubine. But then in the middle of the night, Allah shows up and says, no, you should be able to take what's yours and forget your wives. So then he comes up with a new arrangement where he has his 9 favorite wives who live in a house close to him. Then he gives Maria, his favorite concubine, her own house in the city with her own bed, which was like a huge bloody deal. And he has
next to the mosque.
Concubines that don't get this,
Right next to the mosque, too.
Right next to the mosque, yeah. It said that he had up to 15 wives, so it's pretty intense. 21 with Christian sources, but those are highly debatable.
And eventually she has a kid, and you know what their midwife's name is? Salome.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I'm just saying.
But this
That's
is really
my
important
famous
that she has
Solomon.
the kid, because when she has the kid, Muhammad comes to her and sets her free. And he literally says, "You are free because of Ibrahim, your son."
Yeah, yeah,
But then all this weird shit happens because Ibrahim dies as a toddler.
yeah. It's people in other traditions will say that it was the other wives conspired. They didn't like her, and after this, Muhammad's very depressed after Ibrahim dies, and he kicks it at the cemetery, Al Baqi Cemetery, where the baby's buried. Yeah, that's it right there. And there's groves around it. You can't see right here in the back. There is some groves, and that's where he would spend a lot of his time grieving for Abraham in the cemetery. And Maria ended up going to the date fields. She would hang out in date groves the rest of her life. You know,
That's
she was.
wild. And there's all these weird Sufi traditions that happen later on after Muhammad dies. A couple of these Sufi mystics go to her house, okay, in Mecca, and they take all of these exact measurements, and then they recreate it in Egypt where her protected city is. And to this day, because Muhammad declared it a protected city, it's a protected city. And there's this whole Sufi cult where the focus is not on her, it's on the Sufi sheikh. But if you talk to them, it's really about her, you know?
Oh
So
yeah.
it's this whole weird side tradition. And they talk about how Ibrahim is an occulted figure, similar to like the Shia Imam who talks to them from beyond the grave, you know, and that he, in some cases, in some of these beliefs, they believe he will be the Imam to come. You know, he's
Oh yeah.
Isa
Yeah.
in some of these things. You
So
know?
he hangs out in the grove. He hangs out there at the cemetery to commune with them. You know, and I didn't even mention earlier that he sanctions olive oil as being a anointing oil, and he says, "Put it on your bodies; it's holy and sacred." Because they were using olive oil too, you know, as well. You know, it's at this point that he's depressed and he's fighting with Jewish tribes in the area. And let's go to the next picture.
Right. That's a huge part at the end of Muhammad's life, having these issues with the Jewish tribes that were in Medina.
And so here we have the Battle of Khaybar. And this is where we're going to get into Muhammad's death. But one thing I wanted to notice in one of these images on the battlefield, look at the guy's helmet on the right-hand side, that mushroom-looking helmet in the red colors of the horse.
With the dots. Yeah, that looks like a mushroom to me.
I'm just saying, you
And
know,
the
so
angels in red, like.
and so what happens at the Battle of Khaybar, he ends up killing these family of Jewish warrior poets. They were called warrior poets.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they were a special tribe there. And during this battle, everyone's starving because they're fighting hard. And he says, you know what? Donkey meat is normally halal. I mean, haram, meaning that's forbidden. He says it's now halal, meaning that you can have it. And they start eating donkey meat. That's the first time that he changes the rules on eating donkeys, you know. And so he ends up winning the battle. They end up winning the battle, and he takes out this tribe of warrior poets. And you know, you could talk about them later. We'll talk about them in another episode about these Jewish poets there, because they're a special tribe that a lot of people don't talk about. And they're also connected to Yemen too. You know, like you have the Yemeni Jews, you know,
Right.
that a lot of people, they persecute the Yemeni Jews, are heavily persecuted. They get no love from nobody, you know. But so he wipes them out. And it's at that point we have a character, Zainab. She's the daughter of the lion, Al-Harith. You know, that's the name of the warrior poets. Haidir or Harith. And the lions, sons of the lions. And she says, hey, I'm gonna cook you a feast. Since you've won Khaybar and you're the prophet, I recognize you. And I heard that you like this special food. I'm gonna cook you a dish. So he comes to a feast prepared by her, the Jewish lady, who's Zainab. And, you know, that right there, I'll talk about that in a minute, but you can keep that image. She cooks him a feast. And what she prepares is, in some of the legends, is donkey meat, a special donkey meat. And she poisons it. And Muhammad eats the donkey meat. And one of his companions eats it and tastes the poison and keeps eating it, even before Muhammad, and he doesn't say nothing. And when Muhammad asks him, why didn't you say nothing? And he says, well, because I didn't want to ruin your dinner. And I figured if you're the prophet and you're eating it, and it must be okay. And then that dude immediately starts dying. And then, so to test it out, they give some to a dog, and the dog dies. And then, but Muhammad at that point had already ate some. And he calls the lady forth and goes, what are you doing? Why did you poison me? And she says, what comes around goes around. You killed my family and my husband and my brothers, and so you're dead too. And she goes, here's what happens. She goes, if you're protected and you're the real prophet, Allah would have warned you not to eat this. And if you're really just some warring king, which we think you are, you're going to die. And this is funny because in earlier in the Quran, there's a surah that they talk about, if you're a fake prophet, Muhammad says, if I'm a fake prophet, then God will sever my aorta. You know, it's your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that. And so, okay, so let's go back to the poisoning. So after that, Muhammad survives that night. And he doesn't kill the lady right away. He's like, nah, we can't kill her right away. There's something weird about this. But after that, his throat's all messed up. And they said it was all rotted out. And he suffers after that. That's when you hear, this is the last part of Muhammad's life. So for the next 3 years, he suffers with pain and he couldn't get out of bed. And Aisha had to take care of him. And she would talk about the poison goat, or the poison, it was either a goat, sheep, or a donkey that he ate. And on Muhammad's deathbed, this is what he says. He goes, oh, Aisha, I feel like that poison meat I ate is severing my aorta.
Oh, wow.
That's what he says. He basically says, I'm a false prophet.
Crazy.
Courtesy of the Jewish priestess. Cooked him a special dish. And they're a special tribe. This is a special Jewish tribe. A lot of people don't give them props. You know, she was a warrior priestess too. And she has her own history if you study Zainab's history. Yeah, there's other special characters, and she's one of these like another characters we don't even talk about in this one, but we'll talk about later. The Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, you heard the term Bon Marie?
Yeah.
Mary's bath. It's a double boiler. And she supposedly she was this alchemist from Alexandria, 1st to 3rd century.
Well, she's considered the founder of alchemy. She's said to be the teacher of Democritus, and like we're talking like inspires the whole region, right? There's so many myths about her. It's crazy.
And she's considered to be Mary the Copt as well, but different time period, because what we're talking about here is like 630-ish. Right. You know, so Muhammad dies, and so when Muhammad passes away, he goes to heaven on Barak. And here's an image of Barak. You know, he has a dove saddle, the red donkey, and he has a peacock tail. And I threw that in there because I wanted you to see the peacock tails because of the Yazidi, you know, which is close by up in that region. The Yazidis, Kurdish, you know, they're Kurdish people, and they're close to Kolchis right there. And they relate to Medea and Islam and this ancient stuff. They're like in between. You know, the Kurds, that's why they're a prosecuted people.
It's so interesting with the Yazidi because they're very clearly tapping, it's like an ancient pagan revival movement, right? But at the same time, it takes on Sufi Islamic kind of like a face, right? And it creates this really interesting tradition. It's so sad that what has happened to them because of ISIS. And now like, we don't even know how many are left, right? Almost all of them are in the diaspora now, like maybe 20,000 left in Arabia. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah. You know, well, we're going to do a special episode on them. That'll be later, but we're just dropping some of their mythology on the way as we go. And the Mandeans are close to them right there too. What's left of them too, But
Yeah.
so let's go to the next picture. We're talking about riding on red colored magic things in the air, whether it's a donkey or a carpet. This is part of the Arabian myths,
No, this is a huge thing because it relates all to, like, look at these carpets. You have these red, blue, white, purple dyes, right? And they're using these carpets to communicate with Allah. They're orientating them. They're doing it at ritual times with the sun. It's like, it's very clear to me that it's hinting at a more ancient kind of practice, right? And like, we know that these kind of carpets were used in a major way throughout Iran and the Zoroastrian tradition as well, and like, it's such a huge thing in Persian culture, these kind of carpets.
And some of the ingredients people put forth that could be in these carpets could be Syrian rue. People talk about acacia. We saw those amanita mushrooms. There's so many things. I mean, in terms of dyeing, some things are symbolic, but there's a ephedra, nard, frankincense, cassia, myrrh, cinnamon, nymph. It just depends. Wherever you go in each region, got a whole bunch of different ones. If you go, and like the Homa and Soma, so there's a connection between the Egyptians. See, the Egyptians had blue lily, nymph. They had things that were along the Nile, along with things that they were getting through the trade route. The Phoenicians on the coast, they had their mollusks, the purples, as long as with the things they're trading. The Amanita comes up a little more north and higher, and they're trading with them. And then in between, you got Syrian rue, nards, myrrhs, cannabis, opiums, and then things like St. John's wort,
and you know what?
tansy. Other things are side additives, maybe that onto themselves are not very powerful, but when you combine them in a compound or combination, they work together as a different ingredients, MAOI. There's accelerants, things that break down, help to digest.
Right. And also, we look at, like, if I look at the ancient Dionysian tradition, you have the deer skins. You have, they wrap themselves in the deer skins. They sit upon the deer skins in order to fly to the other worlds. You see the same thing in the Shaivite traditions. These deer skins that they're putting on, that they're sitting on and meditating, that they're using as devices to fly with. And then we have Muhammad calling his donkey deer, and there's this whole thing about flying donkeys that take you to heaven, or like we saw in Siberia, flying reindeer that guide Santa's sleigh, and Santa's dressed up like a giant red mushroom. Like, deer is a clear type of symbolism that is present, and there's a clear way to talk about this stuff. And this flying imagery with these red mushrooms is it's ubiquitous. It's so intense. But what's also really cool, go ahead, sorry.
We have a special guest coming on next week who's a magic carpet expert, I heard.
Yeah, so this is really exciting. So we're going to be bringing on a good friend of ours, Wretch, or Gunk Wretch. He's an autodidact scholar, so he's learned and studied on his own, but he's done some incredible comparative mythology research. If you go on academia.eu, you can find his stuff. He's released an essay on magic carpets. He's released an essay that he calls Volume 1, where he does a ton of comparative mythology. And then he's working on another version of that Volume 2. We're going to be having him on the show also to do just like a deep dive into his background in the future. But next week, he's going to specifically come on so that we can dive more into this Iranian, Persian connection, and we can examine a lot of the Solomonic magic that comes out of this as well, because Wretch is really an expert in this kind of where these two cultures meet, the Zoroastrian and the Solomonic, and these two magical systems. So that'll be a lot of fun.
We haven't covered that yet. The fire worship, Zendavesta, Zoroaster. You know, this is, the Persian culture there are the different empires there. I think they had the longest empire. What was it, 2,000 years or something they had?
Yeah, it's incredible, right? Well, it's one of the oldest religious traditions that we have. Like the Gattas are like 3,000 years old. Those are the Zoroastrian texts, and they're clearly talking about things far older, and yeah, these empires continue for so long too.
And when I was studying some Indian music back in the day, like tablas and stuff like that, the teachers did tell me that some of the Indian musical system developed out of the Persian musical system.
Well, they're so interrelated, right? Like when we look at the ancient Vedic texts, they talk about asuras and Vedas, and they talk about this ancient war. And when we look at the Gattas, they have the same dichotomy, but it's flipped, right? Instead of the asuras being the demons, the devas are the demons, right? Instead of having a soma, they have a heoma. So it's like clearly that at one point these were either a shared culture or interrelated cultures that were far more connected, and then they split off in different directions. They originate kind of in, at least the Vedic texts and these kind of texts, they kind of come to us from the Bactria Margana civilization, where we get a lot of those steppe cultures sort of around Afghanistan and parts of Persia there. But there's a split that happens. One group goes down into India and gives us their Vedic culture. One group goes down into Persia, gives us their Persian culture, It's really interesting how related all this is, and it's hard to figure out where one ends and one begins.
Right. Well, I hope everyone had fun today. Sunday, have a good day today, Easter Sunday.
Happy Easter, embrace the rebirth, celebrate the mother goddess, right?
Right.
Really about this is a time for serious transformative power,
Rebirth.
Right. So thank you everyone for tuning into the Occult Explorers. This has been our first episode of our Arabian legends, and make sure you come in next week when we'll be doing our special on magic carpets with our special guest, Gunk Wretch. So thanks again, everyone, and take care.